Welcome back, everybody, to Jargon Podcast. I believe this is episode 6. There wasn't a whole lot of news this week, but we do have some rather large stories. Starting off with WWDC 2017. That is Apple's worldwide developer conference where they focus on new software, updates, and upcoming hardware for the year. A couple more things include AMD cards. Their price has risen quite a bit within the last week or so. And
You mean Ryzen?
that's good. That's real good. Also, Microsoft has released a new Windows 10 Insider build, and we have a hands-on, and we can go ahead and take a look at that during today's podcast.
All right.
So,
Got a couple of secret things at the end too.
oh yeah, we do actually. Nothing too crazy, but you'll have to wait and see.
All right.
So, starting off this week, Monday was WWDC 2017. That was a developers conference hosted by Apple. We have some software news. We'll start off with that, I suppose. So, the new version of Mac OS was announced, and that is going to be version 10.13. It's called High Sierra because their crack marketing team thought that idea was totally baked. They actually used that in the keynote. That's not my joke.
Oh my good
Yep.
gravy.
They went right for it. So it actually does have a few exciting features, including a new file system called APFS, Apple File System. And that allows for instant file duplication. It's actually really cool. So normally when you copy files, from a folder to another folder on your local machine, it actually has to duplicate the files. So in Apple File System, that takes literally no time. They did a demo of it on the keynote where they copied many large video files, a few gigabytes worth, and on the old Apple File System, it took a few seconds, about 30 seconds to complete the file transfer. On this, it took 1 second. It was crazy.
That's awesome.
It actually really is. They announced an API for virtual reality in macOS. They
Wait. Are people are people planning to game on a Mac?
Well, if they're not gaming, they're going to be making games. It looks really promising. So
Apple needs to just stay where they're at. Watch their P's and Q's.
well, they're watching their G's, and one of those G's is for gaming. So they also announced support for external GPUs. So those giant boxes that you can throw a graphics card in, and they rely on their own power. So those are natively going to be supported within macOS going forward. So you can just plug an external GPU like a GeForce 1080 Ti or even a Titan, right? You can just plug that in through a Thunderbolt connector and it'll just work. Some cool stuff. Also, kind of related to gaming, Steam VR, Unity, and Unreal Engines are going to be natively supported on macOS. So they're definitely taking a priority with VR and VR creation, if not just gaming on its own.
It's actually really good to see. Like I couldn't imagine buying a $3,000 piece of overpriced hardware and not even being able to game on it.
Right, and you're definitely going to be able to do some basic gaming with the new models that were announced. We'll have the specs in a moment. So the public beta for macOS High Sierra will be available in July, and the public availability for the full OS will be available in November.
All right.
So not too far away, actually. Next month for the public beta, and just a few months away for full release. So, Zach, do you have the document open right now?
I do.
Cool. You want to go through the specs for the new updated iMac?
I can.
Okay.
All right. So, new iMac. We're looking at brighter displays with HDR, Kaby Lake processors, whatever, up to 64 gigs of RAM in the 27-inch model, 2 Thunderbolt 3 USB-C connectors, discrete graphics on all 4K iMacs, up to a Radeon 580 in the 27-inch model. That's going to cost a pretty penny.
It already
We'll
does.
talk about that more. Later. Demo for VR content creation shown using Star Wars assets. Ooh, that costs them money.
Yeah, and I'll see if I can find a quick video of that in a moment.
All right, and it looks like a price drop on the 21.5-inch 4K model.
Yeah, I believe it was originally $1,500 for that base configuration, and now it's $1,200 or possibly $1,300. I don't have the exact number here, but regardless, it is multi-$100 cheaper. So I do have
It's really not a whole lot when you're talking about Apple.
Yeah, I mean 20%, right? 20%, 15. I do have the specs sheet up on the screen here. No, I don't. Let's just come back to that later. For some reason, my screen share wasn't working properly.
Showing off Pornhub, weren't you?
Just a black screen.
Uh-huh.
I don't know which one's better at this point. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about that for a moment. So the 64 gigabytes of RAM and the 27-inch model, that's actually twice what the current configuration is. So it is good to see that they still have hope for RAM. However, that RAM upgrade is going to be ridiculously expensive. I mean, RAM is expensive enough right now, and having Apple upgrade it is not going to make it cheaper. Apple's upgrade prices are ridiculous.
It's Apple really needs to work on the actual price point before innovating. Like it's one of the things, like Apple can't innovate much further than hardware allows. And hardware has a set price point. That's why PC owns most of the market, is because Apple tries to sell the same hardware at double the cost, essentially.
Yeah, and to be fair, the iMacs are a relatively good deal when you take into consideration the cost of the panel. Those 27-inch 5K panels, for example, are very expensive if you try to buy them independently. So, integrating that into the price does make it more attractive. But yes, they are more expensive. And I think that, they've been producing these chassis for a long time. This run of iMac cases has been in the market for a while, so you think they would have built up enough surplus to lower the price on more than just one model. But apparently that's not the case.
Well, see, that's the thing, is it's not even that. One of the big things about actual production, like the way production works, is you figure out a way to build what you want. And then you dump some of the money from the sales back into building the same thing, but finding a more efficient and cheaper route of making the exact same product.
Right.
With as long as they've been using this chassis, they should have found a cheaper way to build this damn chassis.
And I believe even the iMacs are using that whole unibody construction where they take a giant slab of aluminum and just machine it to fit all the components inside.
That's a huge waste of time, effort, and money, especially with injection molding or vacuum molding.
Yeah, but people want those fancy aluminum interiors, or exteriors, rather.
Molten aluminum. That's casting.
Yeah, you can cast it and shave off the rough edges.
Exactly. And much less waste.
That could be what they did before, before the whole unibody thing took hold a couple of years ago.
Like, I guess I'll never really understand that company, but that's all right.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, speaking of the iMac, these specs may be more appealing to you. Apple did announce an iMac Pro. Now, before I get into the specs of this thing, I don't quite understand where this is going in the market, what the actual market for this thing will be. Excuse me. So we have the iMac. iMac is decent, for what it does. It's more than enough for the average person, way more than enough. It's almost enough for, hardcore content creators, but it's not quite good enough. You don't have the option of dual GPUs, you don't have the option of super high-end processors. But Apple's rumored to be releasing kind of a modular Mac Pro next year. So that'll be more like this tower behind me here. One of the oldies, in that you can easily upgrade it. It's going to be much better for the long run. So they're rumored to be announcing one of those with super high-end hardware typical of what you would be getting for, a workstation machine or a high-end content creation machine. This iMac Pro is kind of right in the middle, and it just confuses me about who it's targeted towards. So here are the specs. It has a 5K display with HDR, that's 27 inch. It has an updated cooling system, powering up to an 18-core Intel Xeon processor. Yes, they put a Xeon into an all-in-one.
I have questions for Apple about that. But
Yeah, I've got questions too, man. Like, even if you have an 80% increase in cooling capacity compared to the current iMac, is that really going to be enough to handle a 4.5 gigahertz 18-core
18
Xeon?
core. And just think about die space alone.
Absolutely.
All right. Like the amount of real estate required for an 18 core Xeon. Like we're talking about a monstrous processor. Something like the size of this Pringles can. Like,
Yeah, it is. It is a very large chip. So they're going to have ridiculous amounts of cooling for it. I know I'm saying ridiculous, a ridiculous amount. But honestly, there's no other word for this.
if nobody's ever tried to cool a Xeon, I have. And they're going to need ridiculous amounts of cooling for this.
Yeah, definitely. I have a system behind me here with 2 dual-core Xeons. It's ancient. It's 10 years old. But the heat sinks on it are this tall. They take up the entire vertical space of the chassis. They're like that wide. And they have, like, airplane fans right in front of them. They're super, super powerful fans. And that's the cool old-school Xeons. I can't imagine what this one would be like. But
that's the thing, too, though, is, like, my second question is like, ignoring the actual cooling capacity, why Xeon? With
yeah, why not? Why not
with the X299 platform and the i9s coming, they're literally shaved Xeons. That's all they are.
That's pretty much exactly what they are. And it could be that Apple really didn't know about that product line before. I can't imagine they wouldn't, but maybe they just didn't know about that product line before before announcing this product, and they could have went with Ryzen even, or Threadripper or something like that.
Threadripper would have been an amazing choice because, like, personal opinion here. I stated it last week, but Threadripper is going to just put their foot on top of the i9's face and grind it into the mud. And it's not over the fact that it's going to be, like, ridiculously better performing. It's just got better specs.
Yeah, especially the PCI lanes, which is really where Apple could have, taken the cake here, because they use PCIe SSDs in all their machines.
Yeah.
So having that kind of bandwidth open for extra peripherals would have really cleaned this thing up. So now, to be fair, let me go back to the specs here. So with those SSDs, you can configure it with up to 4 terabytes of 3 gigabyte per second SSDs. I have to imagine those are PCIe or M.2. I'm not quite sure. We won't know until we tear one apart.
Oh, you skipped over the graphics card, buddy.
I did, but we were talking about SSDs there.
Right.
I'll move my way back up to that. So it supports up to 128 gigabytes of error-correcting memory, which is awesome. And up to 16 gigabytes of video memory running on top of the AMD Radeon Vega graphics framework. That's really
gonna
exciting.
Be a beast. So I saw some rumored spec releases for the top tier, the 16 gig Vega card, and it was just literally had, like, it put its hand on the back of a 1080 Ti's head and was just, like, grinding its face in the mud.
Oof.
It was brutal. Like,
my
to be
friend,
fair,
that's going to be an Apple product.
So say, to be fair, though, it's a dual GPU card. The highest end, the 16 gig version of the Vega card is a dual GPU card.
Okay.
But AMD's configured it to where it's recognized by software using Infinity Fabric as one GPU. So that's actually really cool.
And that's handled through hardware, not software, so we don't have to worry about crossfire.
Yeah. You could actually. They were saying you should be able to put that card into a 3-way crossfire.
So technically 6 GPUs.
6 GPUs
Running, what is that? No, that's
48
48 gigabytes of RAM.
Yeah.
And is that HBM?
Yes, each BM2. Yeah.
Okay, so 48 gigabytes of HBM2 RAM, potentially. Not in this particular computer that we're talking about right now, but that is crazy.
we're talking some very powerful machines.
Definitely. So rounding out the specs on this new iMac Pro, we have 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports. So those do support USB 3.1, DisplayPort, external GPU support, all the goodies that come with Thunderbolt 3. Also, we have, the first time on an Apple product, 10 gigabit per second Ethernet.
About damn time.
And that is through an RJ45 connection, not the fiber one. So that's really cool, meaning you can, put these things on a super, super fast network and be able to share video and other huge files very quickly.
Like lightning speeds. Like, they're going to be quick.
And another cool thing about this is it is available with a configurable VESA mount. So you can just mount this to a stand, mount it to a wall, mount it to whatever you want. And it's also available in space gray finish.
Ooh.
AKA almost matte black. And it comes with a space gray peripherals, so a Magic Mouse, the keyboard, and a trackpad.
So it looks like this thing's going to be available this year.
Yeah, it will be available December, starting at $4,999.
Man, they're pricing that like Intel prices their processors.
There's got to be some kind of connection there.
Probably the fact that it's got an Intel 18-core Xeon
Well,
in it.
it does. The starting configuration will come with an 8-core Xeon. I don't have the starting RAM, but it will be 1 terabyte of a 3 gigabyte SSD.
Oh, Lord.
But, the Thunderbolt ports, the 10 gig Ethernet, all of that will still be there in the starting configuration.
I was going to be honest. If that was the price tag for the system that we were talking about, I would have bought one.
No, unfortunately, that is going to be more like, 15,000. Then I don't have any behind-the-scenes information on that, of course, but I've went on Apple's website and spec'd out a Mac Pro before. That can get up in the 20K area.
That's so freaking ridiculous. All right. I'll build a PC with the same hardware.
Exactly.
All right. I'm going to take over here. I'm going to cover the next 2, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
All right. So it looks like new notebooks featuring Kaby Lake processors and higher-end, faster standard graphics.
Yeah, nothing crazy there. I mean, the faster graphics are going to come with Kaby Lake. So they're kind of bunching that together.
So we do realize, well, that allows us to realize that they're not going to be Kaby Lake X variant processors.
Oh, no. No, they're just going to be Kaby Lake updates. A little spec bump on the notebook side.
Great. The reason why I say this, people, is if you didn't know, the new Kaby Lake Extreme processors do not have iGPUs.
That is correct.
Because they're a last-minute scramble product because Intel needs to make money quick.
Plus, their notebooks aren't super high-end anyway. So we're probably never going to see that Extreme Edition inside of a notebook from Apple because they generally don't put, except for the highest end tier, they don't put dedicated GPUs in there. And when they do, they use AMD stuff. Maybe they'll have like a 5 series chip, a Radeon RX 500 series chip in there for the super high end.
We can only hope.
Yeah.
I honestly, though, with the fact that drivers have been written for macOS, I'd love to see a 10 series GPU in there.
And that's the interesting thing. A lot of people were talking about, getting 10 series chips in these new products, but nothing has NVIDIA graphics. Every single product that Apple announced or released on Monday had an AMD GPU in it.
That's going to raise AMD stocks.
It will, but the cool thing is, Apple will not be subject to the interesting developments we're seeing with AMD's graphics cards, probably because they've already ordered thousands
More,
en masse.
more than likely, yeah. They've probably already got a warehouse with thousands of GPUs sitting in it.
Exactly. Custom built for their motherboards.
Yeah. All right. So it looks like iOS 11.
That's right.
Yay, another one.
Another one.
Upgraded to Siri's voice, available in female and male. Siri can now translate. Malls and airports are now mapped floor by floor. Great. Welcome to the club. Maps support speed limits and lane guidance. Wow, I said that weird. Guidance. About frickin' time. Do not disturb while driving.
So that is a really cool feature. I mean, it's actually really nice because if you have your phone in your pocket and you receive a notification, if you have previously enabled this do not disturb while driving feature, then it just won't notify you. Even if your phone is like maxed, it won't send you the message. But there is kind of a caveat with it. Say you're not driving, right? It'll detect that you're in a vehicle using Wi-Fi triangulation and the gyroscope, and it still won't send you a message. Yeah, exactly. Now there is a way to on the lock screen to say, "Hey, I'm not driving. Cool it," and it'll continue to send you the notifications you would have received.
I'd rather accidentally miss a message than get something distracting while I'm on the road.
Absolutely, and that's why they've introduced this feature. Just
it's a smart idea, really, because like let's face it, most like looking really at young adults, late teens, early 20s, like most accidents in that age group are caused by people with phones.
Yeah, people texting or doing a Snapchat.
And let's look at demographics of that age group and what type of phone they're using. It's normally a goddamn iPhone.
Yeah.
So that's a really good push from Apple because they have a huge portion of the market share for that age group and demographic and everything. Plus, it's just helpful in general.
Yeah, I would be really happy to see this across the board from Android and whatever's left of Windows Phone.
Pretty sure Windows Phone is dead.
They're still pushing updates, man.
They're pushing updates, but I don't think they're making anything new.
I think they're only pushing. Well, they're not making anything new, and I think they're only pushing updates just because it's the same kernel as desktop Windows now. So they might as well push an update.
Yeah, I get it. All right, incremental updates for default apps.
Yeah, just little stuff.
All right, ARKit.
That would be ARKit. So
ARKit.
Augmented reality, similar to Microsoft HoloLens.
I see. Coming to developers, augmented reality for iOS. Interesting.
So they did this demo. If I can interject here, they did a demo where they had an iPhone. Well, actually, I believe it was an iPad on the stage, and they were filming a table, so you could see the table on the phone, or on the iPad rather, and they were able to place just a little teacup on the phone and see it on the table. And they placed a lamp next to it, a virtual lamp, and the light coming off of the lamp was able to create shadows on the teacup, and they were dynamic shadows. So if you move the teacup, the shadows would change. If you move the light, the shadows would change. And it was
That's
just
cool.
It was a really cool thing. And one little thing I will say about this is that once ARKit comes to iOS, Apple will by far have the majority market share of augmented reality and VR devices. Because it's just going to work on all their devices, hopefully. But we know how that works out.
Yeah, Apple's had a hard time giving support on all devices in the past.
Well, the interesting thing is that this update, iOS 11, will be available from the iPhone 5S forward. So everything iPhone 5S and newer will be upgraded to iOS 11.
Alrighty then.
That's a pretty large amount of devices.
Okay. Yeah, it is. All right. You want to take over that next story?
Yeah, so there's, I guess, a growing market for smart speakers. So far, we've seen Amazon Alexa, we've seen Google Home, and a few other smaller brands joining the group here. And of course, these are devices that they look like speakers, they have speakers in them, but you can actually communicate with a personal assistant on these. And the only personal assistants really missing were Cortana and Siri. Microsoft released some very small announcements regarding Cortana, but this is Siri's introduction to the smart speaker market. It's called HomePod. It'll be covered in a mesh fabric similar to parts of Google Home, but it's basically a little pillow speaker. So it actually has some really good audio claimed by Apple. It has a seven. It has a seven.
The company, it doesn't realize people like headphone jacks.
Yeah, and the company that bought Beats. You know,
Yeah, and they're fantastic audio.
headphones with headphone jacks. Anyway, so we have on the HomePod, we have an array of 7 tweeters around the bottom of the device. Those are high-powered tweeters. Each one has its own amplifier. And there's also a 4-inch high bass upward-facing woofer. So in the top of the device, the woofer sits in the middle. It kind of looks like the Trashcan Mac Pro. And the woofer actually faces upward. So there is a bass cavity below it inside the speaker, so the bass can go out and below it. So the interesting thing about this HomePod is the processor. It has basically an entire iPhone built into it, minus the screen. So it's controlled by Apple's A8 processor, which is really no slouch. It is a couple generations old at this point, but it is a pretty powerful chip. That allows it to automatically detect the geometry of the room it's in. So it can tell if it's in a square room, a rectangular room, an octagonal room, and to basically control the power of each of those tweeters so it delivers the best sound for the room it's in, which is kind of cool. But of course, in Apple style, this thing costs $349. Yeah,
I'd rather pay the extra $1 just for the the clean, even
$350.
whatever. Yeah.
How much is that? Oh, it's about $350. $350. But I think it's a really cool device, and it has a lot of potential, even though I'm no longer in the Apple ecosystem really at all. I just have this thing. There it is. Yeah. This thing to have an Apple device. I've moved over to Android and pretty much Windows full time. But I think this will be great for the market. It'll allow Google to improve Google Home and provide competition for that same demographic there.
The only problem is the competition's not going to last long because Google's going to market it $100 cheaper.
That is absolutely correct. And,
Oh well,
Google Assistant's just better.
it
It's
is.
part of the reason I made the switch last year, or earlier this year, actually, back to Android. As another smaller announcement, I'll go ahead and take the iPad Pro.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, a new iPad Pro was announced today. Or not today, rather, last Monday. Not a huge update. They changed the screen size to 10.5 inches. But the cool thing about it is it now has a variable refresh rate display. Now, we've seen technology like this from AMD and NVIDIA previously. AMD is being called FreeSync, and NVIDIA is called G-Sync. And basically, it adapts the refresh rate of the screen, or how many times it updates per second, based on the content you're viewing. So if you're reading a book or something, you just have your phone reading an ebook, it'll only update like 25 times per second, just to help save battery life.
Saves battery life, saves eye strain due to flicker.
Even that, yeah. However, if you're playing games, games that are light enough that your phone can really stretch its legs and use those relatively powerful CPUs and GPUs inside of it, it can bump the screen refresh rate up to 120 hertz. So you get 120 frames per second on a mobile device. And of course, it'll adapt based on video. It'll be able to display 60 hertz for video, 24 hertz for video, depending on what you're viewing. So yeah, that's the new iPad Pro, 10.5 inch, 120 hertz.
Are they gonna call it like iSync? Just
I think they just called it variable refresh rate. I don't even see a fancy name for it. They had fancy names for everything else.
yeah, like the old. I'm surprised it wasn't called like the iHome instead of the HomePod. Like,
Yeah, really. Although iHome is a brand already, so you know those really cheapo
oh yeah. I've seen
peripherals
those.
you find at like Dollar General and
Walmart.
Kmart.
Yeah, the Walmart favorites.
Yeah, and I think Walmart's actually developed their own brand, black something,
Yeah,
orange
it's
and
like
black
black.
packaging.
Yep, yeah, I know what you're talking about. They're actually building gaming PC peripherals now too.
Of course they are.
They're not bad. I've used some of their stuff. They're not bad.
Okay, that's respectable.
I don't recommend them, but they're not bad.
Yeah, I don't recommend iHome either. I think we have an iHome USB hub, I believe. It was only like $5 compared to 15 of the second cheapest. So yeah, about the $5 one, and it's fine, but it's ugly as sin. It's not a very attractive piece of hardware.
Oh, jeez.
So yeah, that's
All right.
probably why they didn't call it iHome.
Yeah. All right. It makes sense. All right. I think I'm going to cover this story here. It's
Yeah, and actually, if you just want to talk about it very quickly, I'll try to get the screen capture fixed. I'm having an issue with that, so the screen will go
Yeah.
black while he's talking about this very quickly.
all right. So
Never mind.
AMD cards. We're talking about AMD cards, namely the RX 400 and 500 series cards, and the fact that they're sold out worldwide, like everywhere. Newegg, Amazon, the screen capture is working.
It is working.
So, all right. So as you guys can see here, here's a source article over it. There was a lot of coverage from a lot of different people. I picked a random article. You'll find stuff about it. Newegg sold out. Amazon sold out. eBay listings are at double the price of the original listings or more. I have found RX 480s and 580s on Newegg, Amazon, and eBay selling for the same price as a GTX 1080. And the
in reality,
reason-
the price, sorry about that, the price should
Oh,
be
go ahead.
almost twice that much, right? I mean, it's what,
It-
$400 for a 580?
Not even.
Okay.
The 580 and 480's price point was comparable to the 1060.
Oh, so like 250, 300 maybe.
Yeah, like that's the price point for those cards. Like,
And they're going for 700?
yeah, 650 to 750, like in that price range. Like they're actually pushing 1080 Ti like pricing.
That's insane.
So, and the reason why is cryptocurrency. In other words, currencies such as Bitcoin, online currencies. Some new miners, like the software that's developed to, break the algorithm to mine up cryptocurrencies, is written in OpenCL, which we covered OpenCL a couple weeks ago, where it's merging with Vulkan.
We've actually covered it a couple of times too.
Let's say, like we discussed at that time, AMD cards are just naturally better at OpenCL. It's one of the big selling points for AMD. And because of this new surge in GPU mining and how cheap the RX cards were and how freaking good they are at mining, they just skyrocketed on sales. So everything's sold out. Anything you can find that's for sale is 2 to 3 times the price. And it pisses me off.
And according to this article, the previous generations are being sold on eBay for way more than the $100. And it looks like even older versions, so potentially like the 300 series, has spiked as well.
I actually saw some listings for like the old 7770s going for $500
No.
and selling.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, we have a 290 here.
I saw I saw listings for the Fury cards, because those were like the mining kings when they came out.
Right.
And well, they're hitting it again, because the Fury cards are actually, two Furies in in Crossfire are about as comparable to power as a 1080. So like Furies are definitely, hitting that market again for cryptocurrency mining.
Cool. I mean, it's not really cool if you're looking to buy a system, or assemble a system right now with AMD graphics. But it is cool that these are kind of getting a second breath of life, especially the older ones.
My big thing is like, this is really gonna throw a huge wrench in AMD stock demographics.
You think so?
Well, these cards were meant for the gaming community, and now they're the big boom. And on paper, it's going to look like these were gaming sales because they're gaming cards. And it's gonna make it look like AMD's the way to go for gaming, even though the 10 series GPUs are technically beating them. And it's just going to throw the demographics way off. People that are kind of fresh into the building their own PC game are going to be like, well, it looks like AMD's the way to go, and I might have to buy a $1,000 RX 580.
Oh, and that would be painful. I mean, you could almost build an entire system with a 580 in it for that price, or you should be able to, using high-end components and high-end storage devices, liquid cooling. You can build a nice machine with
a B350 motherboard, an R5 processor, an RX 500 series card, 16 gigs of RAM, and a standard hard drive, and a $20 case. And you're probably looking at $700-800.
Right, and you could add just a little bit more money into each of those components, like get a better case, get some RGB lighting, and actually walk away with a very good system for $1,000 at MSRP, which these are approaching 4 times MSRP at this point.
So, cryptocurrency mining has always been something that upset me. Like it's cool, I guess, but at the same time, like, this is legitimately free money. Like, until you file taxes at the end of the year, this is all just pocket bank. As soon as you beat the initial startup cost, it is all money in your pocket from there on. And I've read some demographics. There are people with single computers. They're buying like Core i3s from like 4 generations back.
Yeah.
And throwing, 3-way Crossfire on there with RX 580s or whatever they can even get their hands on, because you can Crossfire almost any card from AMD.
Yeah, that's right. That's something AMD does have going for it. You don't have to have identical GPUs for Crossfire.
Exactly. So, but yeah, people are buying cheap i3 processors, Pentium processors, just like whatever they can throw a few bucks at, get it. A crappy board with, enough PCI slots to do what they want, because that's another cool thing about AMD cards is AMD doesn't give a darn about what the PCI slot is. If it could be X4, X8, X16. It doesn't care. It just operates. It's like, I'll deal with what I got.
And it takes full advantage of what it has.
Yeah. So people are throwing together $350, to $650 PCs, throwing out mining, and they're making like $900 a month.
That's crazy.
That's one PC. And especially with as low power as the rest of the components, you could power that system off of a 600-watt power supply.
Yeah, absolutely. Even like the Pentiums you mentioned, you can get one of those basic gaming design Pentiums. They're dual core systems, but they only cost like $70 from Amazon, and that's with a stock Intel cooler. So yeah, like a $50 motherboard, and just spec out the rest of the machine, a little bit of RAM, and throw 3 graphics cards in it.
It's so crazy to think about, because that the amount of money you can make off this process, it's actually, so many times I'm like, I'm gonna buy a system, and then I'm just like, no, stop it, don't be stupid, because as soon as you do, The only thing that you're going to do is you're going to get a three-way crossfire up, and something's going to change, and cryptocurrency mining is going to go back to CPU bound.
I don't see that happening just because you have huge data sets to work through, and GPUs are definitely, the best way to chomp through a large data bound project if you can write using OpenCL.
See, that's what killed Bitcoin mining. Originally Bitcoin mining was GPU bound. That's why the Fury cards flourished as well as they did. And then it actually switched up to where CPU calculations were faster.
I wasn't aware of that. I thought it was more due to large server farms where people were, building appliances essentially that were better at, doing the calculations and folding all the information than desktop-based PCs.
No, not really. No, it was just that it was. It kind of broke down to the more cores that were available for processing is what hit it, and it was to the fact that CPUs, you can buy variants of 10 core CPUs. Like, let's see here, what's an example of a 10 core CPU? It would be the 6950X.
That is one, yeah.
That's a 10 core CPU. That's an X99, I believe.
Yes.
As the chipset, you can snag some cheap ass X99 stuff, especially now that it's last gen.
But
10
before
cores.
you continue with that, GPUs have hundreds of cores.
Yes, but the big thing is the fact that like let's look at the 6950X. You can overclock that to 5.2, 5.3 gigahertz. Like, those things will freaking cook versus your GPU at half a gigahertz to 1 gigahertz.
That's interesting. I'll have to look into that using CPUs for cryptocurrency.
But
have to look into it.
GPU is definitely the way to go now, and AMD GPUs is where it's at because of OpenCL software.
Interesting. I have an article open. I'll read into that later. But just moving forward, we do have a Windows 10 Insider build to take a look at. This was released a few days ago, and I guess this will be our first live demo on the podcast on the video version.
I'm gonna cock my head sideways here, and I'm gonna watch the live stream myself.
Okay. So let me open up my remote desktop connection. We are running it through remote desktop connection. I have it running actually on the computer behind me on the Mac Pro. Crazy enough. But here we are. This is the new build of Windows version 16.2.15. This is build number 1840. So there are a few updates here. First off is an update to the start menu. They are using the new acrylic design that we featured in a previous podcast. So if you look very closely, you can see kind of a spackled texture on the start menu. That is using the new acrylic framework and the Microsoft design language. Let me open that back up here. So on regular Windows, let me just open bear with me for a moment. Open my normal start menu here. You can see how there's quite a bit of lag when I drag it up near the bottom. It tears it. It's just not a very smooth experience. And also, resizing this way, it's not smooth at all. It just goes in blocks. Well, on the new build of Windows, if I can isolate the start menu here, there we go. When we try to resize it, you can resize vertically with no tearing, and you can resize horizontally, and it just brings everything over to fit. Another cool thing is you can resize diagonally. Now, I understand not many people resize their task or their start menu every day, but it's a good experience the one time you do it.
You don't want to try something like the one time you want to do it and then it acts like crap. It's just a disappointment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's something that somebody will always comment on. They'll be like, I tried to resize my start menu one time and it was total crap.
Yeah, and if you open the feedback app in Windows Insider, you'll see so much of that. And actually, acrylic, this new transparency system that they're introducing with the new build of Windows 10, that was brought forward by using the feedback of Windows Insiders, people like us. So people like the transparency in Windows 7 and Windows Vista, and wanted Microsoft to bring it back, so they are in some way.
they're giving it a go without doing glass.
Exactly. It's gloss, not glass. So,
So-
moving forward, we have updates to Action Center. I don't know how many people actually use this. I use it pretty frequently. So if you click on this little notification icon here, this is Action Center. So this is where all of the notifications from Windows are kept. So I have some things here like from the News app, from Windows Defender, giving me a little summary of my antivirus scan. Some photos that were automatically updated to my OneDrive, or I'm sorry, uploaded to my OneDrive from my phone. A notification to set up OneDrive, and some mail here too. So the new features are, they're grouped by type, which is not currently how Windows 10 does it. So when you try to drag away a notification, it drags the entire group or the individual post. Hey, Zach, would you mind sending me a Skype message? Actually,
I can do that.
we'll see if it shows up. I don't have Skype open, but it should actually show up on here. Well, it showed up on my desktop but not the remote. That's fine. So yeah, you can just click and drag, remove items, just like you normally do in Action Center. And if we can get everything cleared off, you can see that nice acrylic feel. So it's very slightly translucent. You can see the Windows flag in the background there. And you know, it shows up behind acrylic. Here's a really good example. So Calculator is a great example. If I can open Calculator here.
This is how we first demoed to see how it was.
Yeah, just to show it amongst ourselves. So as I drag it around, you can kind of see, you know, the background behind it change. And it's not glass, it's literally acrylic. So it's kind of like a plasticky, soft touch feel, which is nice. I wish it were slightly more transparent, but it's acceptable.
It would be cool if we could get an opacity bar.
Yeah, and as of right now, there's not. So you can enable this, you can go to Personalize, go to Colors on the left, scroll down, and look for the toggle for transparency effects. You can turn them off, and as you can see in the Start menu, they're off. And if I turn them back on, you should be able to see the colors very, very slightly through there. And I'll make this more apparent by dragging the window, say here. Yeah, so you can see the outline of the window behind the Start menu. So that is acrylic. We have some more updates to Microsoft Edge, which I never use, but I'll go ahead and open it here.
Yay, Edge.
Yeah.
That browser that replaced that terrible browser with, but it was still terrible.
Exactly. So it actually gives me kind of an update on what's new in this current build. I don't have a pen attached to this computer right now, but that's okay. A lot of the updates do involve the pen. So if we open this link, here's an entire list of what we can do. Some of the new features are you can pin websites to the taskbar. So if I want to pin this website, it says select pin this page from the taskbar from the settings menu in Microsoft Edge. So if I go to settings and find it here, it doesn't seem to give me the option. That's interesting.
It's broken.
Live demos. Live demos are great. But aside from that,
Hey, nothing. It can never get worse than Bill Gates watching his newest version of Windows blue screen during the live event.
yeah, so if nobody knows what he's talking about, there during the Windows 98 product launch, he had a printer on stage, and he was advertising the new USB plug-and-play standard. So you could just plug a device in, it would automatically install the drivers and work. Well, he plugged the scanner into the computer, and it blue screened, and that was a whole mess on stage in front of thousands of people.
Being televised and it was great.
Yeah. So another new thing here, apparently it's new, is full screen mode in Microsoft Edge. So if I hit F11, it goes full screen. I'm legitimately surprised this was not a thing. I figured this would be one of those things you just bake into a software by default. And most of the desktop applications I write anyway, F11 just works.
Right? I don't think I've ever used an application where F11 didn't just work.
Right? So some new features here, again, are you can annotate books in Microsoft Edge, which is kind of cool. So if you open an EPUB format document, you can actually highlight certain parts of the like paragraphs. You can circle them, and it works in PDFs apparently as well. This is a PDF, as you can see in the screenshot. So you can annotate them, you can write on them, write some comments.
That's actually really cool. That's a really nice thing to see.
Yeah, it is. And you can actually do that right here by using this feature currently. And this is available for everybody in Windows 10. So if you click this button again, this little ink button here at the top, if you click that, you can just draw stuff. Draw stuff. And you can export that as a screenshot. So basically you just save it and you're done. It's automatically saved to OneNote, so you don't have to worry about losing it. And again, that's available for everybody. It's not new in this build of Windows. So it looks like, moving on, there are some more updates for Cortana, which I won't be able to show because I don't have a pen included. But basically what you can do with it is you can get prompts for notifications when events are found in your camera roll. So if you were to take a photo of a poster that you saw on the street and it automatically uploaded to your OneDrive account, Cortana could see that and say, hey, I can set a reminder for this concert. Would you like me to? Which is a nice feature.
And you'd be like, shut up, Cortana, because she always freaking talking.
She is talking quite a bit. I have her disabled on my desktop just so she
I
won't
do
do it.
too. I think the worst part of Cortana was the fact that like everything that you said she thought was like, hey, Cortana.
And 30 people's computers just said, hey, Cortana. Oh, check it out. Caught her in the act.
Sorry.
See, I disabled it on my computer, but not the remote computer. So there we go. All right.
Sorry, remote computer.
It'll be fine. So we've got some more updates to handwriting. So you can actually, there is a handwriting panel in Windows. It's just a little pop-out panel you can write in, and it converts it to text. Now you have overflow text. So traditionally you would just run out of space, and you'd have to keep writing over what you had written. Now you can just write as much as you like, and it moves and allows more space for you. There's improvements to handwriting recognition for English, and also a Find My Pen feature. So if you have a Surface tablet and you lose your pen for some reason, it'll actually connect via Bluetooth and use triangulation to help you find your pen. So that's cool.
It's
a little weird. I mean, I have a... Here we go. My Dell Latitude XT3 tablet came with this Dell pen, which does work with, Windows handwriting and all that, but it's not Bluetooth. It's just pressure sensitive, and it uses technology built into the screen instead. It's Intrig. So that will not work for this pen. But for Surface owners, that should be beneficial to you. And just a couple more updates in this new version of Windows. The Windows subsystem for Linux, so you can actually install Linux inside of Windows, kind of. Well, that no longer requires developer mode to be enabled. There's a new feature for enabling and disabling game mode in your current game. So if you open up a new game, if you can hit Windows G, the game bar pops up, and you can have certain options to, say, stream directly to Mixer, formerly Beam. Now you can disable game mode, that optimization feature released in the Creators Update. You can enable or disable that built into the game bar. And the last thing I have here is Hyper-V gets virtual battery support. So if you're running a virtual machine inside of Microsoft's built-in Hyper-V system, you can actually enable a virtual battery to make sure things work properly on battery. It's really helpful if you're writing apps to introducing different power states for your apps that require battery. So if you're writing an app and it's supposed to go into low power mode when you switch to battery, you can now kind of emulate that inside of Hyper-V.
That's awesome. That's actually really awesome.
Yeah, and there would have been no way to, emulate that previously on a desktop. So that's good. And that is essentially it for the new version of Windows.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Good job, Microsoft.
Yeah, good job, Microsoft. You're keeping it up. That's what's important.
All right. So, um, let's see here. Got a mild story, and then I got like the one that I'm super excited to talk to you guys about.
Okay.
So, do you mind if I cover both of them, or do you want to cover the Google one?
I've been talking for the last 10 minutes straight, Zach. You can do whatever you like at this point.
All right. So
I've got the source here.
All right. Google released the reCAPTCHA API. So not really a whole lot on this. It's just so reCAPTCHA, well, CAPTCHA, reCAPTCHA, there's invisible CAPTCHA. Essentially, all it is it's a security protocol that usually or used to have to like type in words or street numbers or something like that, and then it became just check the box, and it would verify if you're a human or not. Well, now they're releasing the API so it can be built into like mobile apps and stuff like that for your phone, which is going to make things a lot more secure and safer for just the general public, and it's going to remove access for a lot of bots that just spam online markets. So just that's really cool stuff.
Yeah, it is. I agree that, this is definitely, an area that can just keep improving because unfortunately we have malicious types of people that will want to exploit any holes they find inside of these verification services, and they'll build bots that are always better. So it's good that Google is releasing the API for this and allowing other organizations and developers to access the same kind of great technology that Google has running behind this feature. I mean, CAPTCHA is really an amazing thing to verify purchases, to aid in account creation, to make sure you're not a bot and just someone that legitimately wants to use the product. And again, it's amazing that they're releasing this to everybody.
So, all right. Good guy, Google.
Everybody's a good guy lately.
So, all right.
Technology companies are.
For the last story, it's not a typical story that we would cover, but I love airplanes, so I'm going to cover it.
I like planes.
Boeing has announced that they plan to start testing pilotless, wow, that was hard to say for some reason, planes next year. So, originally what it was is there was a briefing done before the Paris Air Show, and during the briefing, Boeing was talking about the gap that is between the Boeing 737 and the Boeing 787, which are one is a commercial airliner, the other one is a luxury Dreamliner. The 87 is a very big plane.
Really high-end piece of transportation then.
So they're looking to build a plane to like fit the slot between those, like something that's a little more luxurious than like an entire plane that's essentially coach, but not quite everything's first class.
Right.
So, but when they were talking about this during the briefing, they mentioned the fact that they're planning to attempt to make this plane require no pilots. And that they plan to start testing this plane flying without a pilot early next year.
And that's really cool. I mean, this is going to be a huge upset, in the air industry. I mean, I don't know how to feel about this, honestly, because right now, pilots make a decent amount of money. They make what, $80,000 a year.
Yeah, a livable
typically.
wage.
Yeah, exactly, a livable wage. And I've seen studies that around $75,000 per year is basically the point where you don't have to worry about anything because you can get what you need, and anything above that is kind of like a diminishing return, in terms of income. So these are people that make a good living, but they're going to be out of work essentially if this catches on. And I do see the article talking about self-flying drones available for less than $1,000, and that, quote, the basic building blocks of the technology clearly are available, end quote. And that's absolutely right. We have tremendous success with self-driving vehicles out in California and the Seattle, Washington area, with companies like Google and even Tesla taking advantage of their great technology and radar detection. So it can obviously work. It is going to work.
It's going to work.
But what about the I just keep thinking back to these people that will inevitably not be working, to try and continue that pun.
I understand that. Like that's a huge issue, is putting people out of work, which nobody wants to see. But at the same time, like, are these new planes even going to have a cockpit? Like, honestly,
no. And they probably won't even have like a pilot on board. That the backup will probably be just remote control, right?
Yeah. So that it's just kind of scary to think about. Like, oh man, it's kind of an old story, but the plane that a passenger landed in the Hudson River because the pilots became incapacitated.
Ooh.
So, like, it's the same thing. Like, what if something fails and there's no way for an actual person to take control? Like, let's say it's some sort of an electronics failure. All right. So I used to assemble communications devices for Boeing, and nothing against their communication devices, not giving any other names, but sometimes they fail. That's the way hardware works.
Exactly. Everything is going to fail. So, exactly. What is going to be the backup system? Because if you don't have a trained pilot on board and, say, remote control fails, like you get caught in a storm and you're not able to send any kind of radio signals through, including those that would be able to control the plane, that plane's going down.
Yeah.
And to be fair, that is like 2 backup systems gone, but if the circumstances are right, that could be a very dangerous venture, because like a self-driving car crashing,
so
you're only on 2 dimensions. You're on a road. You're not flying over the Pacific Ocean.
So let me give you guys a horror story. All right. So one of the stories that used to be told while I was building systems was of it was just a small issue, right? The story was really meant to scare employees to do their job properly. And it definitely worked for me, because one of the issues that happened one time in a Boeing plane was somebody didn't put the polyurethane finish over one of the circuit boards. This circuit board literally sat inside jet fuel. Like, the part went inside the fuel tanks. And the thing is jet fuel's not conductive, so it didn't short anything out, but jet fuel reacts to lead.
Okay.
And it causes a buildup. It creates a material that comes out like tendrils. And those tendrils touched, and that shorted the part. Like, it wasn't like a huge explosion or anything, but it actually literally turned the entire electrical system for the entire Boeing aircraft off.
Wow.
So
if that happened in the air, that would be absolutely disastrous.
Well, that's exactly where it happened. It was about 30,000 feet in the air.
Okay.
All electronics went out, and
was there a backup system for that system?
There is now.
Good. That is good.
There wasn't at the time.
Well, that's how we learn. Failures are not failures; they are learning opportunities.
So, I will say, just to give everybody the happy ending, everything was fine. The pilots were trained properly. They knew how to engage manual controls, like full manual controls. They landed the plane, even though they had to check all the gauges with a flashlight.
Good. I guess to learn from that incident, there needs to be a contingency plan for every situation. Especially if you are in a giant aluminum tube flying thousands of feet in the air.
Yeah,
especially then.
What if you're in an object that makes very, very big objects look very, very small, I don't want to crash.
That's an excellent way to put it. Well, I do believe that finishes up this week's episode of Jargon Podcast. If you do, like this, and you'd like to continue watching this podcast and seeing it grow, don't forget to share it with your friends, whether that be on Facebook or any other social media site of your choice. We are aiming to do this every single week, every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We're just trying to bring you the tech news of the week, guys.
And try to be a little entertaining in the process. So if
We make
if
bad
you
jokes.
have any ideas, yeah, bad jokes are funny, and we're both dads, so it works. Like that's what we do.
Almost there, yeah.
So say that's what we do. Bad jokes are dad jokes.
And dad jokes are bad jokes. I've been doing dad jokes since I was a kid, man. Just preparing for it. Well, everybody, I do hope you have a good remainder of your weekend. We hope to see you next weekend, Saturday, 7 p.m.
Bring your friends.
Bring your friends. Have your friends bring their friends.
You know what? Why don't we just invite the whole damn world?
The whole planet. Come on. Come on. We'll do that tech talk, and we have your jargon here.
We got it. All right. We'll see everybody that shows up next week. Have a good week coming forward. Goodbye.
I got a kitty. Say bye. Bye.
My cat's probably somewhere being fat.